After the Texas Longhorns spring game, the talk of the town was Arch Manning and the quarterbacks and how well they performed. But also on the other side, we there was mention about the secondary and how bad they looked. And now, arguably one of the best secondary guys, Terrance Brooks, has decided to leave. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Longhorn Central here on the Voice of College Football, the Texas channel. The man to my right is Matthew Miller, the resident expert of your Texas Longhorns. And again, Matthew, for those who watch this channel on a regular, yesterday, Mark Rogers, the parent of this channel, asked you a question saying, hey, of all the transfers out, have any of them really mattered to the Longhorns roster
Yeah.
coming into next season? And obviously you said no. And not 24 hours later, presumably one of the starting cornerbacks, Terrance Brooks, decides that he's going to be leaving the program. So I ask you this: is this your fault?
No, but I think Mark asked that question, 18 hours too early? Because, yeah, over Steve Sarkisian's tenure here at Texas, especially the last 2 years when he started to get things rolling recruiting wise, this has been the biggest departure we've had. He asked about Jalen Catalon yesterday, and Catalon was injured. Played well when he was on the field, but this is a guy that started for Texas last year at the field position, at the cornerback position. And he was a pretty good player. He's only 19 years old. I think that's something people forget is he's really young. He's got the lineage with his dad playing in the NFL. So I still think there's a lot of untapped potential there. I think wherever he does decide to transfer, someone's going to get a good player. And if you can just coach him up, you could get a potential NFL cornerback or someone who's going to be like an NFL safety um, wherever he decides to go. Now, like I said, he was also a big flip for Steve Sarkisian too. Like coming out of high school, he was highly rated. He was Ohio State committed. The day signing day, he decides to flip to Texas, and it's a big win. You get the son of Chet Brooks, who is an NFL, good NFL player, deciding to flip from Ohio State to Texas, and it was the first like big key player that Steve Sarkisian brought in. And then he transfers out a couple years later. He was all Big 12 second team last year. So, like I said, has he struggled? Yes. His last couple plays, honestly, at Texas. I mean, look at Washington. He struggled in that game, and then he gets beat. His last play ever that people are going to remember is DeAndre Moore beating him in the spring game for 75 yards. That's his lasting impression with us. I wish him luck as long as he doesn't transfer to the SEC. And I know people have been talking about the rule of where you can't transfer to the SEC. I don't know if technically Texas is considered SEC yet because that doesn't take place till July 1st. So is there a loophole where he could still transfer to the SEC? That's a question that will be interesting. And maybe he goes and plays on the other side of a rivalry with Texas A&M, just like where his dad played.
I think I did look into this, and I think as of February 1st, there was something about the football calendar
Okay.
flipping. So as of now, yeah, Texas and Oklahoma. That's why, and we'll get to this a little later. Um, getting guys like Dominic Williams or whatever to sign is so important because you don't want him to take that extra trip because mainly he's visiting SEC schools, and it's
Yeah.
important to get that down so that the other visits go for naught. But back to Terrance Brooks. Now, I completely agree with you in the sense where the headline might be a bigger impact than the actual impact on the field. Now, don't get me wrong. As I talked about, his performance on the field, his first year was solid. It's kind of taken a step back the past couple seasons, but still, at least for this season moving forward, he was going to be a presumed starter. Now, there's words that the coaching staff had a conversation with him and simply told him that the spot wasn't necessarily his, that they were open to bringing in new challengers to just basically kind of shore up that cornerback spot. And with the result of today, it sounds like he just wasn't very happy with that decision. But now, take a look at the roster now. Who do you think now needs to step up, and what might be some of the options that we might have to look for, to bring in?
Yeah, so just in house, I'll start there. Jahdae Barron was already getting first team reps at that field cornerback position, which is the wide side of the field. And I think he can play there. I'm not 100% confident in that. Obviously, he's a very good nickelback, but those two things are definitely different when it comes to the football field. So he's there. You have Kobe Black as well, freshman coming in 4-star. He's a big guy, 6'2", 204. This is the type of guy that PK wants on the defensive side of the ball because he's very long, rangy, and athletic, and that's what you want, a guy that can get up, play press man coverage, and then play the ball as well when it's in the air. And then a guy that actually was the second highest rated cornerback on the team last year. He transferred in from Wake Forest last year. I thought he was hit or miss. He was a lot like Terrance Brooks to me. They're very similar as Gavin Holmes, but he was the second highest rated cornerback on the team last year. Now, if you're going to look outside, the first two names that come to mind are Cormani McClain from Colorado, a number one cornerback in the class last year, who's actually rated higher than our best cornerback, Malik Muhammad, coming out of high school. Long and lengthy as well, 6'2", a little bit light, 165. You would definitely have to beef up a little bit. And then the guy that I want, and the guy that's been in the transfer portal for a very long time, and I thought Texas would have been interested, honestly, before this, because they were interested in Jabbar Muhammad as well, is Tacario Davis from Arizona, 6'4", 6'4" at the cornerback position, 195 pounds, second team all Pac-12. So he's a very good player. Obviously, you have the Johnny Nansen connection, which helped land Bill Norton. And then you have Tacario Davis with that connection as well to Arizona. And I actually think this is the one guy that, in my opinion, is a clear upgrade over Terrance Brooks right now in the portal. Obviously, we still have a week left, and that could change, and more guys could jump in. But this guy, all Pac-12, he's gigantic. He's one of the biggest cornerbacks you'll ever see. He's bigger than Ryan Watts was last year, and we thought Ryan Watts was big. So he would be a huge get. And honestly, someone I'm shocked Texas hasn't been all over since he entered in January of 23 this year. And then there's another guy that people aren't talking about, but he sent out a pretty interesting tweet today. Denver Harris. Denver Harris, the guy from North Shore, Dallas, 6'1", a little bit on the slider end compared to the rest of these guys that I mentioned, but he's a very highly talented player. His issue is off the field. He's one of those guys that was in his Dodge Chargers racing around Texas A&M, and he was kicked off of Texas A&M, basically got kicked off at LSU. He's at UTSA now, but he sent out a pretty interesting tweet today, basically saying, interesting. And maybe Texas is interested. That is a complete flyer, though. That is a boomer bust guy. Tacario Davis is definitely the guy you want if you're a Texas fan. And the name you want to keep an eye on right now. Obviously, in the portal world, that could change. We could get off here right now, Sonny, and someone else could jump in. But for right now, Tacario Davis is the name to look out for.
He's the number one guy I had on my board as well. His PFF grades were off the charts. Defensive grade of 85.5. He had a coverage grade of 87.5. And the only other guy I had listed was also from the same state, Arizona State cornerback Edward Woods, who had a PFF grade of 76.8 and a coverage grade of 77.9 as a starter for the Sun Devils last year. Now, we kind of referenced the spring game earlier. Obviously, the offense looked great. The receivers looked fantastic. But a lot of those throws by the quarterbacks ended up being easier throws because the receivers had gotten behind the cornerbacks. And so there were already whispers about what that cornerback room was looking like before this happened. Now, do you think cornerback becomes as much of a priority as that defensive line, or do you still think the defensive line is the main priority right now?
I think defensive line is still the main priority just because of depth. Like I named Jahdae Barron, Gavin Holmes, Kobe Black. I haven't even talked about Andrew Makuba, who can play all over, and you may try him out at cornerback. I know he played nickel, same as Jahdae Barron. And then there are other guys in that room as well that I think if you really needed to, you could play. But yeah, the defensive line just needs a little bit more help. But this definitely, it's number two. It's not even close. It's defensive line, then cornerback. There's nothing else on this team that I would even put up into that upper echelon of needs for this Texas team. And I'm, it's hard to judge on a spring game, but I really believe because Steve Sarkisian is an offensive mind, the offense is always going to look better than the defense in the spring game. That's just how it is. If you go look at like Michigan's spring game, their defense looked better than their offense, and they're a defensive-oriented team. And I think that's just the way spring games work for the most part. So I'm not super worried. I know we're definitely more versatile in the back end than we have been a long time, and the talent is there. It's going to be up to Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon to coach the guys up that they do have for right now. But we do need another cornerback. There's no doubt.
Once again, folks, you're watching the Longhorn Central on the Voice of College Football Texas channel. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're going to try to bring you up-to-date news as fast as we can, especially in regards to our beloved Longhorns. Matthew, let's switch over to the defensive line, as I just mentioned. Obviously, Jay Toya decided to go back to UCLA, and that was obviously one of the big guys, the big targets that the Texas Longhorns had to shore up the biggest perceived weaknesses that we do have. Um, Obviously, I think Dominic Williams is visiting today, or is it tomorrow?
He's visiting. He actually made his way down from TCU to go visit Texas today. I believe his visit is supposed to be into tomorrow as well, though.
Got it, got it. So, do you think like this just puts the pressure on even more so for the staff to land Williams? Because from what we've read, Oklahoma seems pretty confident, and all the guys that are kind of in the mix for Williams, you're talking about the blue bloods of blue bloods. So how important now is this potential commitment for the coaching staff?
I think it's super important because Mark and I talked about the four guys that were possibly there. Now it's down to three. You already got Bill Norton, so that was one off the board. Then Jay Toya goes, so you're down to Dominic Williams or Dominic Williams, however you pronounce it, and then Sermian Barrow from Michigan State. Those are the two guys you're really looking at. And Dominic Williams is by far, in my opinion, the better player out of the two. I think he's got high level NFL potential. He was the Big 12 Freshman of the Year 2 years ago. He's a guy that really fits in this scheme really nicely. And unlike Bill Norton is a run stuffer. This guy can make plays and get after the quarterback. He had 5 sacks last year. He was very good at that. So that's something Texas could definitely use on the interior of the defensive line. And to me, Oklahoma can be confident all they want, but he took his visit and he left. Texas needs to get him on this visit and keep him there and make sure he stays on the 40 acres. Because that's, if you look at recruiting, whenever someone comes on your campus, especially transfer portal, if they leave, there's a really good chance they're not going to come back. So to me, they have to lock this down. Like I said, 9 out of 10 times if they leave, they're not going there. Now, this kid could just be very stubborn and say, I'm going to take every visit I have and then decide. There's very few of those guys. Most guys are like, when they find the place, they sign on that dotted line and they just stay there. So I'm hoping the Texas staff can lock this down because, again, there really isn't anyone to this caliber in the defensive or in the portal yet. Could that change in the next week? Absolutely could. We didn't think Terrance Brooks was going to be in the portal 24 hours ago. So could a great defensive lineman or someone of this caliber jump into the portal? Absolutely. But we don't know that. We know this guy is. We need to lock it down today or tomorrow.
All right, Matthew, we're a couple days beyond the spring game now. What's your level of concern for the defensive side of the football?
Going in, the bad thing was I thought the secondary was going to be a strength, and then you watch the spring game, and like I said, I do think the offense is always going to look a little bit better. But then you see the performance, and Terrance Brooks leaves, it drops my concern down on that. And the problem is now you don't have the interior defensive lineman that you had last year to rely on. Right now on this defense, you're really going to rely on an Anthony Hill at the middle linebacker position, and then the edges. We're very deep at the defensive end position, and the safeties are pretty good too. But the cornerback position and then the depth at linebacker after Anthony Hill and David Benda are also a question mark. So they definitely need to get some players in on that side of the ball, and the players they do have, they need to coach up. So overall, if I'm ranking it, Mike, or in a percentage wise, I'm like 70% confident. I was probably like 80% confident before the spring game. So I've dropped about 10%. And if we don't get anyone, it's going to continue to drop until we kick off and see what we actually have on the field.
Well, hopefully we do get some more talented players in, and when we do, I assure you, us here at the Texas channel at the Voice of College Football will be on immediately to break any news that we can and talk about any incoming transfers and hopefully not any outgoing transfers. Matthew, can you let the crowd know one more time where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me right there on Twitter at MatthewMS97. I keep it all sports all the time. So just follow me there. Texas on top of baseball, professional football. I guess this is pretty much professional football now, but the NFL I also tweet about. So if you want to follow someone that just tweets about sports, likes sports, loves sports, talks about it all the time, you can find me there.
And you can find us at Horn Central and also this channel that you're watching us on right now. Again, give us a follow every Monday night. You can see my partner over there, Matthew, and the Mark Rogers talk on the Texas Huddle Live. That's Monday nights at 7 Eastern, correct?
That is correct.
And that's a place where we just recap everything going on with the state of the program. Once again, we'll talk to you guys later. Hopefully, as any announcements happen, we'll jump on as quickly as we can. But until then, see you soon.